Are we live? I think we're live, people! Ha 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 ha! Hey everybody, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Master 88 here and welcome to the Linux Workshop. I will be starting in just a few minutes, but first, housekeeping as usual. If you enjoy these live streams just as much as I do, then smash that like button, ring-a-ding that notification bell, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Let me just make one last modification here, and we will be starting. I just got to get all my filters in place, because I forgot to do this beforehand before I went live. This way you all don't hear all the background noise or anything like that. There we go. Perfect. Alright, so right now I'm looking at my bandwidth and everything seems good. Everything seems very good. If you notice some changes since I last, put out that video a couple days ago where I showed you all my Arco Linux XFCE setup. I still have XFCE on here, but I'm now using LXQt desktop environment for a more lightweight workflow and assembly, and just to simply make sure that the frame rate, the CPU and GPU usage is at a nice even level here. So that's why I switched to LXQT, is to have a better workflow. But I still have XFCE. It's just I'm not going to be really using it much going forward. Anyway, I have a couple announcements for you all. Let me just get my schedule up here. Oh, hey Benny, you're just in time. We're going to be starting the Linux Workshop very shortly, but I need to get some announcements out of the way first. Okay. So, let me just... Yeah, I won't be able to do... Let me open up a new tab. There we go. Alright, now where do I go to look all this stuff up? I think we just go here. There we go. Okay, so this is what I wanted to show you all. Okay. So, this upcoming weekend on December 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Florida time, I will be doing a Linux Coffee House news show stream, so keep a lookout for that on December 9th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Florida time, USA. On December 14th at 4 p.m., I will be doing a Dueling Book tutorial live stream to show everybody how to use Dueling Book, how to set up an account, this, that, all the other. So that'll be December 14th at 4 p.m. The next Edo Pro Duel Night plus Open Chat is December 22nd at 4 p.m. And the Linux Live installation for the month, December 24th, Christmas Eve, 4 p.m. I will be doing a live install of Dark Zero's Zero Linux KDE edition. So keep a lookout for that. As for any other stuff that I need to mention, this Tuesday, the long-awaited Linux History Shorties Fedora will be released on Tuesday. So keep a lookout for that. Other than that, I have no other announcements at this current time. I will give it about 5 minutes, and then we will get started. Okay. Okay, so far, frame rate is nice. Okay. Hold on just a minute, folks. I will be right back. I gotta step out for a minute. Hold on. Okay, people, I'm back. Let me, check out the comments here. Yes, Ben, I will be available. I will be available to hang out, after this, so, we can go over the ISO. I actually tested it this morning, and, even though we did everything to try to fix Light DM, Ben, I'm still having the double login. So, I don't know what else to do about that. I tried to figure out a way to fix it myself, and unfortunately, my effort failed as well, so I don't know what else to do about getting Light DM fixed, so I don't know. Okay. Yeah, let's just leave it alone, Ben. I mean, there's nothing really more we can do. I say the only other thing we can do is just look at the package list, take out what we don't need, put in what we do need, and that's it. The only other idea that I could think of that would resolve our little login issue here is if we switched Light DM out for a different login manager. I mean, we could switch to SDDM. or we could use the Lie login manager, or we could go LXDM. Those are options. Okay. At worst case, we'll do LXDM because it looks nice and it's a really cool login manager, and there's not much to tinker with it either. It's just, LightDM has had problems here and there when it comes to being tested in virtual machines, so I think going LXDM is what we have to do here. Okay. But anyway, the 5 minutes has officially expired. I want to get down to our main discussion of today, and that is the Linux Workshop, of course. So, what do you say we get started, shall we? So, I'll tell a little story first, if you don't mind. My first encounter with Linux was all the way back between 2008, 2009, and back then I didn't know what Linux was. It looked like a really interesting operating system back then. And so what I attempted to do back then in 2008, 2009 was attempt to burn a really old version of Ubuntu onto a CD, pop it into my Windows Vista machine, and Linux just wouldn't work for me back then. Very laggy, very buggy, couldn't really get a good workflow out of it. So up until 2018, a couple years ago, I didn't touch Linux again until 2018. 2018, I discovered the wonderful community that is the Linux community, with good, kind folks like my buddy Benny Boy here, Total OS Today, Tim F, Tamo, Steve's very own, Tech Bismo, Pizza Loving Nerd. The list goes on and on and on. And when I found this community, to me, I felt like I found home. And what do I mean by that? I felt like I found a community that I knew in my heart that I could belong in. That I could tell people my tech interests, my tech hobbies, what I do with computers and tech. I felt like I found a community that I could tell this stuff to, and lo and behold, like I just reiterated just seconds ago, the wonderful community that Total West Today, Steve's very own, Benny Boy, list goes on and on, the community that you guys built. I remember around either June or July of 2018 is when I discovered Total West Today, and saw my very first to me, my very first live stream of watching a Linux person, and it was a wonderful experience. Meeting everybody for the first time by typing hello, I'm new here to the community and stuff, into the live chat. It was a wonderful introduction of something that would ultimately become one of the best decisions I ever made in my life, was to eventually try Linux again. And the first distro that I tried in the modern era of Linux was Peppermint OS. Rest in peace, PCNetSpec. You will be missed, sir. And when I tried Peppermint, it blew me away. I mean, the workflow was so much like Windows. It was just unbelievable. And I used Peppermint off and on from that point forward as my daily driver. And along the way, I tried many other different distros like Linux Mint, Ubuntu Mate. Heck, with Benny Boy's help, for the first time ever, I tried Arch Linux. It took me several tries to get it right, but we did it. And then eventually, for about 10 times in a row over the course of several years, I tried Gentoo here and there. I tried Redcore, Sabalion. I tried even other distros that I never heard of, like Elementary OS and so on. I've tried so many distros over the years. And now in 2023, I pretty much found my ultimate workflow. And that's Arco Linux LXQT. And even though I still have the XFC edition, which is what I first installed, LXQT, in my opinion, is a really beautiful workflow and a really lightweight, less resource-heavy desktop environment. To me, I like this better than XFCE any day of the week. But I just want to say also, I don't know how my life would have been if I never discovered Linux or discovered the Linux community. I don't know. Most likely, I would have been a different person. But anyway, that's pretty much my story of how I got into Linux and how I discovered the Linux community. Anyway, let's move on to the main topic here, the Linux workshop. So essentially, for those who are new to Linux, who just discovered Linux, you're probably asking yourselves, like, what is Linux exactly? What is Linux? What is a distro? I bet you're asking yourself very many questions. So I'm going to get down to brass tacks here. Linux is a kernel that is pretty much built on top of the of what is called the GNU utilities. And when you combine both of these together, you get an operating system. Now, many years ago, a lot of Linux enthusiasts used to call it GNU plus Linux or GNU/Linux. But over the course of many years of the operating system's history, a lot of people in the modern day, started to just call it Linux because, it's easier to say, it's easier to identify, and most importantly, the culture of Linux enthusiasts, that's just what they identified it going forward, is just simply Linux, because it's easier to say. Now, once in a while, I will say GNU/Linux or GNU plus Linux, but I just mainly identify it as simply Linux because it's easier. Even though the truth of the matter is that Linux is just the kernel built on top of the GNU utilities, which makes up the whole operating system as a whole. So essentially, the other question I bet you guys are asking as well is, besides the kernel being built on the utilities, what was the very first Linux distributions? Well, around 1993, a young developer at the time, Patrick Volkerding, decided to basically create one of the first mainline Linux distributions called Slackware, which Slackware, for those who don't know, is one of the very first mainline Linux distributions. It is I wouldn't say the install process is new user friendly, but it does give you a very good learning experience. Like, for example, it uses the old Incursus installer from back in the mid early 90s to backwards. Before, we had modern installers like, Ubiquity, Calamaris, Refracta, all of that. Slackware was basically the first one to basically, bring more attention to Linux as a whole, because it has wonderful documentation, wonderful information on how to install it. You can pretty much use any desktop environment or window manager on it. The main way that you would update your system in Slackware is slackpkg, which is also the same system that you would use to install packages that you would either download on the internet, or you would basically install them if you already have them in your downloads folder. A little after Slackware came Debian, and Debian is still around today. It's the second oldest surviving Linux distribution, besides Slackware being the first and oldest surviving Linux distribution. But Debian Debian would go on to have a wonderful life in the Linux world and Linux community, spawning many different Debian-based distributions. Slackware would even go on to have many distributions based on it as well. And also, for those who didn't know, and I'm sorry I'm repeating that phrase again, but it's just how things are. Anyway, back to what I was saying. And for those who didn't know, Debian would be basically later on forked into what we now know as Ubuntu. Around 2002, we also had the introduction of both Arch Linux and Gentoo. And I almost forgot about this other one. Around 94, 95, 93, somewhere around there, we also had the introduction of SUSE, or SUSE Linux. But some people call it SUSE. I called it SUSE when I first discovered it around 2018. I didn't know what it was at first, but anyway, back to my little discussion here. So essentially, the point I'm getting to is that over the course of 30 plus years, we've had many different Linux families spawn other distributions. Basically, it's basically like a Linux tree, if you can imagine that, a tree of Linux distros. So back to 2002, we had Gentoo and Arch Linux. 2004, we had the very first version of Ubuntu, which would go on to be a very popular Linux distribution, and many years later, we would have countless other distributions after that. Unlike Windows, what makes Linux so special is that the way the Linux kernel is built by design, Linux, even though there are Linux-specific viruses, Linux cannot get Windows viruses at all, whatsoever. There is no way by the kernel's design that a Windows virus can infiltrate a Linux system. That is, if, say, for example, if you're being stupid and you install Wine and mess around with .exe files, because most Windows viruses are .exe files. So that's pretty much one thing about Linux that makes it so cool, is it's very hard to get a viral infection in Linux. Another thing that makes Linux so cool is unlike Windows, which takes forever to update at times, and the updates can take so long, Linux can update itself just like that, within minutes or seconds. It's very quick when it updates. And most of the time, you'll be either putting a command into the Linux terminal to update the system, or you have a GUI update manager that handles your updates for you. Another thing that makes Linux really, really cool is free and open source software, which is basically software that you can see the source code, you can see what's going on with it, and if there's anything bad about the free and open source software, you can report it and they can issue fixes. Or they can change it to where the bad part of that software is gone. There's many different pieces of free and open source software in Linux. Like, I'll give you a couple examples. You have Google Chrome, which is free and open source. You have Microsoft Visual Code, which is now free and open source. You have Firefox, which is free and open source. You have Kdenlive, which is a wonderful piece of free and open source software and a wonderful video editor. You also have the most popular live streaming tool / video recording tool, OBS Studio, which OBS Studio is what I use to live stream and record. Wonderful piece of free and open source software. So when it comes to Linux, people, Linux has a lot of free and open source software. So the next thing that makes Linux so cool is, unlike Windows, you can modify Linux to look and function how you want it to function and look. Like, say, if you basically want to use a window manager like i3 or OpenBox, you can do that. Say you want to use the Cinnamon desktop environment and make it look like Windows 10 or Windows 11, you can do that. Linux gives you freedom, control, and the power to manage your computers and your workflow exactly how you want to do. But in the case of Windows 10, folks, you can't do that on Windows 10 because Microsoft locks you into the infrastructure that they want you to do. So that's pretty much the main comparison between Windows and Linux. Linux gives you more freedom, more control, and more power over your computers and your hardware and your workflow. Another thing about Linux that makes it so cool is you have more privacy and security when it comes to Linux. Now, before I go any further, I just want to stress this detail. Privacy and security are two different things. They are not the same thing, folks. Security is basically the philosophy of like how secure do you want your system to be from viruses, trojans, rootkits, ransomware, all that stuff. And with Linux, you can have really nice security. Privacy is the philosophy of when it comes to these big tech companies, these tech giants, and these computer companies, how much data in terms of accounts or computer setup information do I want to give? With Linux, you don't have to give anything. You can be anonymous, and you can set up information the way you want. With Windows, Microsoft is basically sucking out your data each and every day. And that's just how Windows is. So that's pretty much the differences in privacy and security that you will come to expect if you give Linux a try. You will have a lot better time with privacy and security in Linux than you would have in Windows. The next thing that makes Linux so cool as well is gaming. Around 2010 and 2011 is when Steam was introduced to Linux. And it just changed the way we do gaming on Linux. With Steam, we can run a lot of our games on Linux now. And since we have the introduction of the Steam Desk, Proton, Wine, Lutris, you can, with the right amount of modifications and a bit of effort, you can get any Windows game to work on Linux. And also, a lot of Windows games from back in the 80s and 90s, like Unreal Tournament, Quake, Quake 2, Hexen 2, Wolfenstein 3D, a lot of those games have open sourced their code, and now you have source port engines that can run those games on Linux. Some of those games can even run natively on Linux now. So gaming on Linux is in a wonderful state right now, and it is just an exciting time to be a gamer in Linux. So that's pretty much, to me, the pillars of Linux as a whole. Now, the next question is, where would you start if you're coming to Linux? Where would you start? Like, what sites would you go to? What would you need to get started in Linux? Well, I'm going to show you. But first, I need to check out my frame rate droppage. Okay, good. We got 0 frames. No frames are dropping. So right here, folks, we have the wonderful site distrowatch.com. If you need information about a specific Linux distro, if you need to know what's the best distros to download, this site will give you the information that you are going to want to need. So basically, if you look right over here, you have upcoming releases. And right here, as you can see where my mouse is, folks, you can see what Linux distributions are coming out within the coming months. Right over here is the ratings list of DistroWatch's top distros. Right, as you can see here, we have MX Linux, Linux Mint, Endeavour OS, Debian, and Manjaro, and Ubuntu, and Fedora, and it just goes on and on and on, all the way down here to number 100. Right over here to the left is the latest distributions that have just had a release. So say if there's a specific distribution that you want to download, you can go to any one of these right here, and you click this, go here, and you see, folks, you can download the latest ISO if you click OK. I'm using Firefox, by the way, to do this. And then right down here, you click Save, and you see your distro downloads. Now, the next thing that I bet you are wondering is how would you put a Linux distribution on your machine? I'll tell you. There's this lovely little tool out there called Balena Etcher. And I highly recommend it to everybody who's dipping their toes into Linux for the first time, learning how to put Linux ISO images onto a USB stick or whatever type of device you have. Balena Etcher is the main way that you want to put Linux on a USB stick. Right now, I can't put a USB stick in this computer because my MacBook Pro has 2 USB ports already taken up by my camera and my microphone. So, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to pretty much show you all how this works. So, what you would do first is you would download Etcher. For me, what I would do is, since I run Linux, I would get the 64-bit app image, and I would save it to my machine. There we go. And then what we're going to do, folks, is we're going to open up our file manager, go to downloads. Now, the next thing that you're going to do is locate your Balena Etcher app image. Now, if you're already in a Linux distribution for the first time, you right-click, go to Properties, go to Permissions, and you'll want to check this checkbox right here to make it an executable file. Then what you do is you right-click and execute. Give it a minute, and there you go. This is Etcher, folks. This is your best friend when it comes to putting Linux ISO images onto a USB stick. What you would do is you would go here, take your file. I for this demonstration, I have the Arch Linux ISO. What you would do is you would select your target, and essentially, I'm not going to select my hard drive, but if I had a USB in here, folks, what I would do is I would basically, say for example, if this was my USB drive, folks, I would highlight it, press OK, and then right after the USB image is highlighted and set up, you would click the flash button. Once you click the flash button, folks, it'll give you a warning in saying, are you sure you want to do this? You press yes. And then you just wait a few minutes, let it flash the ISO onto your USB stick, and then what you do is you would reboot your machine. And depending on if your computer is a Dell, an HP, or some other company, normally it would be either the F9 key, or maybe some other key like either F1, F2, F3, F4, or F5. One of those. And then once you press your corresponding boot key, whichever key that may be, you'll have a boot manager come up in the center, and all you gotta do is use your up and down arrow keys to then move the highlight box to your USB stick. Then you press your enter button and you'll be inside the live Linux image. And from there, you proceed to install your distro. So, in a nutshell, that's pretty much how to install a Linux distro for the very first time. The next thing I want to go over is, say you're already in your distro. Like, for example, I'm on Arch here. I'm a little scared. Say you're a little scared to use the terminal. Don't worry. A lot of people who are new to Linux are gonna be hesitant on dipping their toes into using the terminal. But the terminal, if you must know, is a wonderful, wonderful tool. And it's not that difficult to essentially use a terminal. Allow me to demonstrate. Say, for example, in the terms of using an Arch Linux-based Linux distribution like Arco, for example. Say you want to install a package. The command you type in is sudo pacman-s. Say we want to get LeafPad. You type in your password after you press enter, and then you press enter again. It'll bring up the information on LeafPad and ask you, are you sure? Do you want to proceed with the installation? You type in the letter Y, press enter. Then what you do is you go to your application menu. For example, say if we're using LXQT or XFCE, for example, your application menu will always be on the left. You will go to Accessories, and right here is LeafPad. Very simple. The next thing is, how would you go on to update your Linux system? Because updating is important. You at least want to update your system like every 2 weeks. That's what I do. Every 2 weeks I update my systems. In this case, since we're once again using an Arch Linux distribution like Arco Linux as a demonstration, here's how to update your system through the terminal. Sudo pacman -S YYU. And you see, it's gonna go scouring for updates. And right here, folks, it will tell you what packages have an update. You press Y again, click enter, and boom, your system is now updating. Now, I can't stress this enough, so I'll mention this right now. Unlike Windows, you don't have to reboot every time you update. The only time you ever want to reboot, folks, is if you have a kernel update. If you have a kernel update, you must reboot your system. It's as simple as that. Since I don't have a kernel update, I don't have to reboot. It's that simple, folks. So we're just gonna wait until the updates are done here. It shouldn't take very long for this to be done. And there we go. It's that simple. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a Control-L to clear this out. What I want to do, folks, is show you something else. I'm going to show you another Linux command here. So if you type the word ls and you press enter, it'll display your file system. So normally when you've just installed your Linux distribution, you would have your desktop, your documents, your downloads, your games. Well, games is in here only because I have Lutris, so ignore that. But for the rest of them, you would have music, pictures, public, templates, and videos. So in the terminal, how would you get into one of these areas here? Simple. Just like in Windows, you would type in cd or change directory space slash the first letter of any one of these directories, D, then you press your tab key and it'll autocomplete. So essentially, it auto-completed the word dev, which it's not part of this, but you get an example of how auto-completion works. So we're just going to type a capital D, O, C. Okay, so it's not wanting to do it. Oh, well. Anyway, we'll just do change directory documents. Or you can do CD documents. There you go. I did it wrong, folks. I apologize. So change directory documents, you're inside documents. If you do CD with space 2 dots, you'll go back to the main area of the terminal. If I do change directory downloads, you're in downloads. CD space 2 dots, I'm back in the main area. Say I want to go into the video folder. Change directory, space, capital V, lowercase I, lowercase d. Press your tab key. It'll complete it for you. Press enter, you're in your video folder. So that's pretty much the easy way of getting around. Now, say, for example, you want to delete something or create something. Here's how we're going to do that. Make dir space foo. Now you type in ls, there's foo. Now, say you want to get rid of foo. You do a sudo rm foo. But see, cannot remove foo, it is a directory. But if you type in alongside the rm, you space -rf, there we go, it deletes it. And you see, foo is gone. That is how you create folders and delete folders within a terminal. And you can do the same thing with text files too, or any other file. So if you want to delete something, you do sudo rm space -rf, the folder, or the text file. It's just that simple. But I can't stress this enough. Never, ever, and this is a warning, never do sudo space rm space -rf /*. Never, ever do this command. It will completely destroy your system. This is the most dangerous command in all of Linux. Use this command with care and with caution, please. Thank you. And with that, that's pretty much how you essentially do simple tasks in a terminal. Okay, let me check everything here. Okay, stream is good. Let me check my drop frames. Nice, nice. Okay, the next thing, before I get to the next topic of the Linux workshop, I need to step out of my room for just a minute, but I will be right back. Hold on a minute, folks. Okay, people, I'm back. Let me get a drink of water here. Okay. So the next topic I want to cover in the Linux workshop is file managers. So when it comes to file managers, a lot of your Linux distributions are going to have a file manager built into it. In my case, I have PCMan FM Qt. So let's open it, shall we? So basically, typically your file manager is going to look like this most likely when you go inside it for the very first time. Pretty similar to Windows machines. Your file manager is going to have the show hidden folders option turned off. How do you turn that on in the Linux file manager? Simple. You go up here to View, and then you see this little check mark, folks? Show hidden. Click on that, and there you go. You pretty much have all your hidden documents and files showed up. Excuse me. Now, right over here, I want to show you one of those hidden files. The bash RC. Your terminal most of the time is going to be using bash, which is a shell prompt. That's what you're going to be using, to type in your various Linux commands. The bash RC has it has very simple functions, as you can see. There's aliases, all that stuff. But at the very bottom here, if I can find it, I don't know if it's here. Let me see if I can find it, folks. Oh, there it is. I see it. Okay, so essentially you have right here reporting tools for reporting various computer information. The one you'll be using most of the time is this one right here called NeoFetch. NeoFetch. Open up my terminal. This is what NeoFetch most of the time looks like. Essentially, you'll have the name of your operating system, your host machine, the Linux kernel that you have installed currently, your uptime, your package count, the current shell prompt that you're using, your display resolution, your desktop environment, your window manager, your theme, your icons. The list goes on and on here. You get a lot of good Linux information from this. I recommend anybody to use NeoFetch. But back to the file manager though. So very similar to Windows. You're pretty much going to have your basic files from desktop, documents, downloads, game. Well, like I said, the game folders of Lutris is if you have Lutris installed, by the way. You're going to have music, pictures, public, templates, and videos. But when you have that show hidden files option on, you're going to have all this extra stuff pop up. Normally, I would leave it open. But in my case, I like to have a clean desktop, so I'm going to keep it closed. Oh, and I forgot to mention, folks. Right down here is the amount of free space that you have available on your storage drive and your total space that you have on your on your storage drive. So that's the terminal in a nutshell. Very simple. Next thing I want to cover is workspaces. Now in Linux, a lot of your Linux distributions is going to have a workspace switcher. And what the workspace switcher does, it allows you to switch between different workspaces where normally you would have certain applications open. Like say for example, I have Firefox and OBS opened right here. I go to workspace number 2 and open up my file manager. Now if I go back to workspace 1, I'm back where I have Firefox and OBS. If I go to workspace 2, I have the file manager. The power of workspace switchers in Linux is incredible. It allows you to organize your workflow in certain areas where you want your workflow to be in. It's that good. I'll go back to workspace 1 since that's the main workspace that we're using. So that's pretty much workspaces in a nutshell, folks. Now the next thing I know most of you are wondering is, if I were to switch to Linux, what do I do about drivers? Now, the thing about Linux is that there may be an occasion, a specific occasion, where you may have to find specific drivers on the internet. It used to be that way 10 plus years ago when Linux was in its fledgling stage. Back in those times, you would have to hunt for drivers all over the internet, but not anymore. Because of the way that the Linux kernel matures at an alarming rate, all your drivers that you would need for audio, video, gaming, graphics, so on and so forth, all your drivers are built in to the Linux kernel. So you don't have to worry about getting drivers anymore because each driver is baked into the kernel. And every year, over the course of many, many months, new drivers are added into the Linux kernel all the time. So most old hardware Like, for example, my mid-2012 MacBook Pro that I use for these live streams. All of my drivers are working wonderful on Linux. From my touchpad, to my charging cable, to even my USB ports. Everything works in Linux. You do not get this amount of functionality in Windows. Never, ever. In Mac OS, though, on the other hand, you can get that functionality to an extent, but not as much as in Linux, though. But anyway, the final thing that I want to cover for the Linux workshop is supporting different developers. Now, say you're using a specific distribution like Linux Mint or Ubuntu Mate or Endeavour OS, for example. These developers, software engineers, beta testers, alpha testers, so on and so forth. These people, they have lives, they have families, but they love their work that they do for the Linux community so much. And a lot of those times, it can be very stressful, and it can be very costing in terms of money. So a lot of the time, folks, it's always good once in a while, to chip in $1 or $2 to support these fine folks that develop all this stuff that you see right here before you. From your desktop environment, your browser, or just anything Linux related. Support all these developers. They work really hard to allow us to get our daily work done on Linux and to get wonderful things done with Linux. Even if it's $1 or $2, chip in once in a while to these developers, like the Linux Mint developers, the Arco Linux developers, the developers that do Zorin OS, Ubuntu Mate. Chip in a little bit of something once in a while. And it's that simple. But anyway, that's pretty much the Linux workshop, folks. I'm going to give it about 5 more minutes, and we will wrap things up here. I want to thank you all so much for coming. So much for watching. If you enjoyed these just as much as I do, smash that like button, ring-a-ding that notification bell, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Remember, we got a lot of live events coming up, and I'm most likely doing an outdoors live stream, folks, very, very soon. So keep a lookout for that. Also, if you want to get in contact with me, I'm very easy to locate. You can find me on Discord at Yu-Gi-Oh! Master 88. That's where I'm primarily at. I'm also located on other types of social media websites. I'll have some links in the description bar below, folks, for all the social media handles that you can get a hold of me by. The next thing I want to say is I want to thank you all so much for getting me past the 800 video mark a couple days ago. Thank you all so very, very much. It is because of your love, your kindness, and your dedication, and you giving me the motivation to keep going forward, that I succeeded in terms of reaching over 800 videos. Thank you all so very, very much. It's because of all of you that I continue to do what I love to do. Not just for Linux, but for the cause of free and open source software. Spreading more awareness about many different projects so that these projects can continue to thrive and grow. That's my purpose, not just as a YouTuber, but as a human being. To spread awareness about different types of technology that's free and open source so you all and me can enjoy using it. But anyway, I'm gonna wrap things up right now, folks. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, so much for coming, and most importantly, thank you very much for tuning into my channel each and every week to see Linux, tech, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. Thank you all so very much. I love you all to death. Thank you. But until then, this is Yu-Gi-Oh! Master 88 saying see you later. Have a good night, everybody, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye, all.